Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on BloombergQuint Live, India's first digital live streaming business news service. I am Agam Akil. First, the headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump assures U.S. citizens that they face little risk from coronavirus, even as most new cases are reported in countries outside China. Oil prices fall to the lowest in a year, led by virus fears and a reported rise in the U.S. crude inventories. The Damani family continues to bet on India Cement. Brothers Radhakishan and Gopal Kishan Damani acquired further stake in the company on Wednesday. The stock closed on an upper circuit for the second straight day. And former Niti Aayog Vice Chairman Arvind Panagaria says that India's slowdown has bottomed out and that the economy needs to be opened up to achieve the much desired 10% growth rate. Now, it was a volatile session for the U.S. markets on Wednesday after trading in the green for the early part of the trade. Benchmark staged a dramatic reversal towards the end in the red, and the Dow Jones fell for the fifth straight day, marking its biggest intraday reversal in over 2 years. The Nasdaq was the only index that eked out moderate gains. Renita Young of Bloomberg News wraps up the Wednesday's Wall Street action in this report.
U.S. stocks closed mixed on Wednesday as energy shares were at their lowest in a decade, all happening as investors continue to digest fresh information about the spread of the deadly coronavirus and how it may impact global growth. And we are still in the middle of corporate earnings season. One of the latest companies to report, home building company Lowe's, reporting worse than expected sales figures that were two key sales measures despite a strong housing market. As a result, shares were falling during Wednesday's session. Also reporting, Office Depot and Cars.com fourth quarter adjusted earnings per share that beat analyst estimates. Meanwhile, Starbucks joined McDonald's in selling Beyond Faux Meat in Canada. In other areas of business news, we saw the 10-year Treasury yield lingering near record low close that was set on Tuesday, and gold gained during much of the session as some investors were still a little nervous about the coronavirus spread. That's a look at your Wall Street action on Wednesday. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
Let's move on and take a look at the Asian markets now. And we have Rosalind Chin of Bloomberg, who's joining us to give us an update from Hong Kong. Rosalind, good morning.
Good morning. Well, largely a down day on many of the major markets here in Asia Pacific. MSCI Asia Pacific Index losing about 0.8% right now. Some of the key markets here, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong also in the red. We've got Nikkei down by 1.78%, Topix down by about the same amount, and the Kospi also lower. Now, we did hear from the Bank of Korea earlier, and they rather unexpectedly decided to hold their rate at 1.25%. Now, this was against expectations of a cut. People were generally envisaging that the hit from coronavirus on South Korea being one of the fastest growing areas for the spread of the virus now, might put pressure on the Bank of Korea to cut, but actually they held, and instead they offered some support for smaller companies in the sense of a loan facility there. We have seen the US also issuing a travel advisory, raising it to level 3 for South Korea, which means to reconsider travel. We've got the cases in South Korea now at more than 1,500 confirmed cases. The Bank of Korea did say, though, that it's going to monitor the impact from the virus, and growth in Korea has weakened, of course. So that's a situation that the central bank there will continue to monitor. With the bank holding on rates rather unexpectedly. Elsewhere in the region, if we want to look at corporates, we can take a quick look at Hong Kong, where we're looking at Budweiser. Currently, that is down by 2.5%, and that is after its latest earnings, showing that decline in earnings for the second straight quarter, and also sees revenue falling by about $285 million in the first 2 months of 2020, and that is largely because its biggest market is China, and that, of course, is taking a huge impact, huge hit from coronavirus as well. So not a great day for Budweiser. And we're also looking at some property developers in Hong Kong as well. After the Hong Kong budget yesterday did give a bit of support to them, saying that the government is going to try to boost housing in Hong Kong. Quick line from that, all Hong Kong permanent residents over the age of 18 will get a cash handout of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is more than $1,000 US. That has been controversial, but in the past has been, of course, eagerly claimed by many residents of society, although there's a question as to whether that money goes back into Hong Kong economy where people spend it. That's the hope of the government, but whether that happens is up for question. Back to you.
Rosalind, thank you so much for joining us and giving us that update. Of course, that also will have implications on Indian markets, and I'm going to get in Darshan Mehta to talk to us about the same. Darshan, it seems that we're not going to see much respite even today.
Yeah, it was, and yesterday everyone was excited when Dow was up 300 points, probably late last night, but it ended down over 100 points, and the Dow futures are also down almost 200 points. So yes, you're right, there will be more pain. The SGX Nifty is down 50 points currently. It's recovered from the lows of the day, but nevertheless, there is a negative traction that's happening on our markets as well. If you take a look at what happened in trade yesterday, while again we saw that they were selling on the Nifty, and it seems across the board, it's not only the large caps or the mid caps or the small cap being sold off. Across the board, there has been selling pressure that's been seen on the market. Pull up the Nifty Bank and the Nifty PSU Banking Index. Again, the sale not as much as some of the Nifty stocks, but nevertheless, the Nifty and the Nifty PSU Bank were also down in trade. How did the ADR pan out in trade? Surprisingly, Vedanta and ICICI Bank managed to end in the green, but apart from it, there was selling pressure that was seen on HDFC Bank, which was down 0.5%, and Wipro, which was down 0.5%. Infosys was down. Dr. Reddy, surprisingly, some of the pharma stocks managed to do well. It was up 1%. How did the markets pan out? Flows of 3,300 crores on the cash market. Over the last few days, we've seen the DIs trying to buy out whatever the FIs have been selling. So that's the trend. What contributed to the fall in the Nifty? Again, there was Reliance, ICICI Bank, Infosys. So the heavyweights are contributing. SBI probably gaining, and today HUL probably might take pole position because of the NCLT clearance of the GSK merger. Now, in terms of the F&O side of the market, again, there are fresh short positions that have been taken. Rollovers are taken at 61%, that too on the short side. If you're looking at the Bank Nifty, that too was down in trade. Rollovers at 54%, that too also on the short side. So there is selling pressure that's being seen on our markets. Now, if you're looking at where overall positions are taken, 11,700 is where put writers are active, but at higher level, call writers have become much more aggressive. And today's fall, again, if it intensifies at 11,800, 11,700, put writers will be forced to shed positions in open interest. So the traction certainly seems to be on the negative side. Yesterday also, again, call writers active at 11,700, 11,800, and at higher levels, put writers came down with positions, and that's why the PCR also came down significantly, because call writers have become much more aggressive. So probably we are moving on into the oversold territory. VIX was up 8%. Market has been extremely volatile, and VIX has moved to levels of 18, and PCR now at almost the 1 levels, which indicates that the market is now slightly getting into the oversold territory. How did the rollover pan out in some of the stocks? Page Industries, yesterday the Goldman Sachs downgrade that came in, rollovers at 82%, that too on the short side, and ever since the numbers came out, the counter has been falling. The other counter which is under serious pressure is Bosch. Open interest build up of 90%, that too on the short side. So there is selling pressure that's happening on the counter. Amara Raja, another counter, technically extremely weak. A lot of selling happening over the past few days. 81% rollover on the short side. And the last stock is Berger Paints. After the big rally, some of the paint stocks have started to cool off. 81% was the rollover in Berger.
All right, Darshan, thanks so much for getting us those updates. Of course, we'll be watching out for some of those cues coming in. Well, the focus of the coronavirus is now shifting from China to other parts of the globe, with more fresh cases being reported in countries other than China. Italy, too, has reported 12 deaths, with new cases being reported in France, Greece, and Germany. Tom McKenzie and Yuan Won, man of Bloomberg News, brings us the latest in this update.
I mean, what we have seen over the last 1 to 2 weeks here in China is a continued moderation in terms of the infection rate for coronavirus, and certainly that's been seen as a positive by officials here, and it seems like the World Health Organization is underscoring that point. The focus now shifting beyond China, which of course was the epicenter, remains the epicenter for this coronavirus, but the shift focusing to other areas, South Korea in Asia, for example, Italy and Spain in Europe. What the World Health Organization is saying is that you saw over the last 24 hours 459 cases reported outside of China and around 412 within China. You still do have globally more than 81,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus, and tragically, of course, more than 2,700 deaths. But that focus is certainly in Europe as well. We saw that yesterday in terms of the increased numbers of infections in Italy, for example, where you're looking at 378 confirmed cases and now 12 deaths in Italy. And in Spain, of course, you still have 700 people effectively on lockdown in a hotel there over concerns about a number of guests having the virus there. France, 3 more cases and 1 death. Greece has reported its first case. Germany saying that it could be at the beginning of a coronavirus epidemic there. And overall, European health officials saying that, look, they're still at the stage of trying to contain this in Europe, but they are warning European states that they need to be previewing and dusting off their pandemic plans.
Yvonne, and of course, we have seen South Korea now become another hotspot in Asia. We have the BOK rate decision later this morning. Will they pull the trigger?
Well, it seems like this virus could actually prompt the BOK to pull the trigger. Most economists we survey expect a 25 basis point cut later on today, as this virus has now threatened to undercut what already was a fragile recovery in South Korea. The number of cases topping more than 1,000 now, the death toll standing at 12 in the country. And those numbers expected to jump, according to health officials. Now they are testing the 9,000 or so members from that religious group, Shincheonji, which has been the epicenter of this outbreak in the country. A manhunt has been launched to find 200,000 more of those members. And meanwhile, near Daegu, a U.S. soldier also tested positive in the base there. This is the first U.S. service member to be infected with the coronavirus. And J.P. Morgan now saying when it comes to South Korea, the number of infected cases could peak at 10,000. They're citing their insurance team's epidemiology models. They, too, the bank, expect a 25 basis point cut from the BOK today. Ritika did mention just now the BOJ in Japan also asking the major banks how prepared they are with any kind of outbreak. Well, yeah, this concern certainly intensified after developer Mitsubishi Estate mentioned that an infected person did visit one of their buildings in the business district as well. And over in Thailand, the health minister there is saying there is a risk that this outbreak could be more widespread in the country and could rise to that level 3, which is the highest in the country. The total number of cases now in Thailand confirmed 40 cases.
Well, the U.S. President Donald Trump tried to downplay the CDC's warning of a potential outbreak of the virus in the United States. Addressing media persons, Trump said that he doesn't believe that it is inevitable that the virus will break out in the country. He has also made Vice President Mike Pence in charge of responding to any such cases. Anna Edgerton of Bloomberg News brings us the key takeaways from Trump's press conference.
Well, it was kind of like a clear picture of what we've been seeing, kind of piecing together all week, where, you know, the president says one thing, you know, kind of calm down, everything's going to be fine, don't worry, we're prepared. And then you have CDC officials and some other health officials kind of, you know, not sounding the alarm, not trying to cause panic, but at least making sure people realize the gravity of the threat. So we definitely saw those two messages on display here. And even things like vaccine development, you know, you had the actual scientists standing at the podium saying it's going to be at least a year before we have a vaccine that's ready for distribution. And the president's saying, oh, we're going to have a vaccine very quickly. You saw that also in terms of how quickly the virus could spread in the United States. The CDC has said that that is inevitable. The president said that's not the case. We'll be prepared for the worst. But right now, you know, it's not clear how it's going to progress from here.
And Anna, out of all the public health experts that he has at his disposal, it was interesting that he instead picked the Vice President Pence, to head up this virus response strategy, right? Is that fairly controversial, given we know the Vice President's track history in Indiana in terms of handling the HIV crisis there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, we'll kind of see how the repercussions of this play out over the next few days. But, you know, Mike Pence is a part of the administration, which is the point that the president made. You know, he's very clear in saying he's not a czar. He's just part of the administration, is going to head this up. People have pointed out that Mike Pence doesn't have the strongest track record in believing in science. He has advocated for gay conversion therapy and questioned climate change. So there's, he's not an epidemiologist. He's not a physician. He doesn't really have a whole lot of medical experience. But it looks like his role going forward will be to kind of coordinate the different administration agencies and making sure that they're all at least talking to each other, sharing information, and figuring out how to communicate with the American people about this threat.
And now let's see what's making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings us the first word headlines.
India, New Delhi has seen its worst violence in almost 3 decades. At least 22 people were killed in 3 days of clashes between rival groups over India's new religious-based citizenship law. The city's chief minister called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi to send in the army to calm the situation. Modi's controversial law fast-tracks citizenship for religious minorities from 3 neighboring countries, but excludes Muslims. To the Philippines now, President Rodrigo Duterte says his country's forces can fight insurgents and Muslim extremists without any help from the American military. Duterte was defending his recent decision to terminate a U.S. security pact and also said he would stick to his pledge to not travel to the United States. Duterte made that decision early in his presidency in response to President Barack Obama's criticism of his deadly anti-drug crackdown. Meanwhile, the Palestinian foreign minister has hit out at Donald Trump's peace plan for the region, calling it no more than a surrender plan. Riyad al-Maliki also urged the European Union to impose sanctions on Israel if it goes ahead with plans to build 3,500 new units on the West Bank. He told the UN Press Association in Geneva it would destroy any hopes for peace.
Discussed also the reaction by the international community regarding the release of, the deal of the century Trump plan. Of course, he calls it peace plan. Has nothing to do with peace. It's really surrender plan.
And finally, Bitcoin appears to be in trouble, dropping below the $9,000 mark, a key level which analysts watch as a potential line of support. The world's largest cryptocurrency has been falling for 3 days now, with losses amounting to around 9%. The decline questions arguments that cryptos could be seen as a place of shelter or safe haven play during market turmoil, such as the one we're experiencing because of the coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
Okay, shifting focus back into Indian markets, we have Nikki Mirchandani who's joining us to take us through the stocks and news which are there today. Nikki, good morning. What's on your list?
India Cements, that's one counter which is expected to be on a roll again, given that the stake buy news is coming. Radhakishan Damani is again bought in 1% equity in the counter, and along with brother, it is Gopikishan Damani, which has bought in an additional 2.7% equity in the stake. Now remember, India Cements for the last 2 days has been rallying. It has rallied around 20% in the previous session of trade. Day before yesterday, it rallied around 18%, and overall, it's on account of the additional buying which is coming from the Damani family, and together, the Damani brothers now own around 11% in the counter. So keep an eye out on this one. Thomas Cook, where a buyback announcement has come in, the company would be buying back 2.6 crore equity shares at a price of around 57, which is at a premium of as much as 15% over the previous market price. With this, promoter stake is likely to increase to 70% as compared to 65% earlier from the buyback scenario. Rights is expected to be on focus. Government has proposed to sell as much as 5% equity in the counter via an OFS, and the floor price for the offer has been fixed at around 298 per share. We are also looking at HUL, where final LCLT approval has come in for HUL GSK merger. Now this is the last step and is expected to be a major positive, given this removes the uncertainty on when the deal is expected to be completed. With this, we can expect FY21 to be the first full year of the merged entity. We're also looking at Federal Bank, where an analyst meet was held, where the management reiterated its target of ROE ROA expansion to 1.25% during FY21. It said that it plans to launch credit card business, leveraging its 10 million customer base, and continue to build on a strong liability franchisee with focus on asset quality.
All right, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us and getting us that update on stocks and news. But on that note, it's a wrap on this edition of All You Need to Know. Stay tuned to BloombergQuint for more news and updates.